Now, the stock solutions. Yesterday, I just for convenience, I talked about making stock bottles of 1,000 cc, so that's why if you have any of your figures there, may not quite jive. But anyway, we're trying to make a 50% solution. And what you do, I measured it out. I used Bronson's sodium ascorbate powder, and I measured out 500 grams one time and found that it had a dry volume of 600 cc's. So if you're using a 500 cc bottle, you bring the dry powder up to the 300 cc line and then add water sufficient to fill up the bottle up to the, and just regular water for injection up to the 500 cc line, and then I add 1 gram of this disodium EDTA, you know, the stuff that we're using for chelation therapy. And the purpose behind that is to chelate any stray atoms of copper or iron that would enzymatically destroy the solution. So this is the stock solution. Now, a trick that we discovered is that if you're going to make the bottle up before you're going to use it, say several days. I mean, my nurses found they like to make it all at once because you run the bottles, we use glass bottles, you run them through the autoclave and all that. We have a sterile funnel to pour it in and all that. And so they like to make up more than one bottle at once. And so the problem is that when you mix up ascorbate, sodium ascorbate, it turns yellow pretty rapidly, and this yellow is dehydroascorbate, and so the clearer, or it's always clear, but the less color in it, the more potent. So what we discovered is that if you don't mix it up and you just let the sodium ascorbate sit on the bottom as a sludge, that then 2 or 3 days later you mix it up, and then you refrigerate it, but then when you mix it up, it's still crystal clear, colorless. And so we think it's a lot more potent that way. The reason why I don't use the commercially prepared solutions is because there's sort of a fluke that the U.S. Pharmacopoeia requires that ascorbate be made up by taking ascorbic acid, mixing it in water, and then buffering it with sodium hydroxide or sodium carbonate to a pH of 3.5 to 6.0, something like that. Well, I'm not sure that when we give large volume that that 3.5 is really okay. I don't know. I get peculiar calls from physicians around the country who have had troubles giving sodium ascorbate intravenously that I never see. But part of the problem, though, is that there seems to be a tendency that once you've got an IV going is that you put a lot of other stuff into the IV. But what I'm saying is that the solutions of sodium ascorbate, when you make them up right, in my experience, they're just totally without any problems. It's very gentle on veins. I hear from the people who use peroxide that one of the problems is that it scleroses veins. Well, we just don't seem to have that trouble with sodium ascorbate unless you start adding a lot of stuff to it. Now, as far as complications are concerned, I just really haven't seen much of a problem with the sodium ascorbate intravenously. Klinner described hypocalcemia. Now, maybe why I've never seen that is because I only use this in my office, and so patients are ambulatory when they come in. It might be that if you have a seriously ill patient in the hospital, or there might be some metabolic problems that might cause hypocalcemia, and Klinner recommended testing for the swastik sign, and I suppose it would be a good idea to do that if the person were really seriously ill, and he would add a vial of calcium gluconate into one bottle every 24 hours. And say when they're sick in the hospital with something like a viral pneumonia or such, or let's say they've got their body 60% burned or something or other like that, then you'd probably use you'd have the IV going continuously around the clock, and the standard thing is about 3 liters fluid, and in that you could put in, I guess, 360 grams of sodium ascorbate if you wanted. I have absolutely not seen any trouble with the sodium. Sodium ascorbate doesn't seem to behave at all like sodium chloride. I have seen patients in heart failure diurese while sodium ascorbate was going. But now we do see a lot of dehydration, so that I allow the patient, these solutions are quite hypertonic, and so that's why I don't worry about, that's why I put it into pure water for the stock solutions, because we're certainly not worrying about hypotonicity when we're using when we're storing it as a 50% solution. We also see hypoglycemia, and so I encourage patients to bring in a sandwich or something to eat, and they're allowed to eat and drink water throughout the therapy. Also, I have patients take ascorbic acid by mouth while the sodium ascorbate is going intravenously, and this gives sort of a double whammy. Now, the diarrhea caused by ascorbic acid orally is a hypertonic situation in the rectum. The water comes in from the bloodstream to dilute out the hypertonic situation in the rectum, and that's what causes the diarrhea. Intravenous ascorbate does not cause diarrhea, and in fact, it increases the tolerance to oral ascorbic acid. And that's one of the many reasons that makes me think that the diarrhea is simply a hypertonic situation. Now, technically, I cannot get the ascorbate effect with the mineral ascorbates very frequently. Now, sodium ascorbate by vein, they say the same thing, but I think that only about a fifth of the ascorbic acid that we take by mouth ever gets into the body, whereas 100% that we give by vein gets in, so therefore, even if the sodium ascorbate is half as strong, maybe 5 times the amount gets into the body, so that makes it about 2.5 times stronger, which is about right. That's been my experience, that intravenous ascorbate is about 2.5 times more powerful as oral ascorbic acid. Let's see. So then when we have that 50% stock solution, then when we're going to use it, we draw it up into 500 cc's of distilled water. Actually, we draw off 120 cc's and add 120 cc's of the stock solution. That's 60 grams into the 500 cc's. It says distilled water. We sometimes use lactated ringers. I use D5 very, very rarely. I hate sugar of all sorts. So here I've got the patients off of sugars. I have a lot of hypoglycemic patients and so forth, so then I give them a bottle of D5 and they wonder, what, am I crazy or what? But anyway, if I have a patient who is severely hypoglycemic, yeah, I might use D5, but usually not. And so absolutely no preservatives. There's a little EDTA in that but other than that, it's just sodium ascorbate. Now, the solution should take at least 3 hours to administer. You know, patients are always trying to push you to go faster. They can take it faster, there's no question. But it's just my thought that too much is excreted in the urine if we go too fast. I think there's an optimum rate. At luncheon, somebody was asking me about that since it's being lost in the urine, then is it doing any good? Well, I think these are marginal amounts that we're absorbing when we do this. I said that if someone drank 10 beers and was stopped by the highway patrol for drunk driving, that they should question the policeman and say, well, if you drink 1 beer, the alcohol is coming out of the urine, right? And he'd say, right. So therefore, it's not possible to get drunker on 10 beers than it is 1 beer. Well, I think that the idea that you can't get more grams of ascorbate with 100 grams given intravenously than you can by taking 1 gram is just absolutely ridiculous. This concept of saturation, I mean, the thing is you can obviously eat ascorbate and have it administered to you faster then you're able to excrete it, and I think the body has use for that. What we're trying to do is to push high levels of ascorbate into the tissues involved with the disease and to reduce that oxidative redox potential in the diseased tissues into a reducing redox potential. So, theoretically, you can cut off all inflammations by neutralizing all free radicals, and that seems to be what happens, and this happens very